All right, so get ready, because today we're going to dive into a corner of the linguistic world that doesn't always get the spotlight, but trust me, this one is bursting with cool stuff. We're going deep on Berber languages.
And that's a great way to put it, because you might be surprised to learn that when we say Berber, we're not talking about a single language.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's easy to think that. But imagine the Romance language family. Spanish, French, Italian, all those siblings.
Right.
Berber languages are kind of like that. A whole family, as diverse as, say, Europe itself.
A whole family of languages. See, I always thought it was just Berber, so we're talking about a lot of variety here.
Absolutely. And it's a huge family that millions of speakers, mainly in Morocco and Algeria.
Mm-hmm.
But you can find pockets of Berber from Egypt's Siwa Oasis all the way over to the Canary Islands.
Wow, that geographic spread is incredible. But I gotta admit, before we started prepping for this deep dive, I hadn't really heard much about these languages.
That's a common experience, unfortunately. Even getting a reliable headcount of Berber speakers is a challenge. You see, a lot of censuses don't even list them as separate language groups.
Yeah.
It really speaks volumes about how they've been under the radar historically.
Under the radar, it sounds like it's been more than that. Our sources suggest a history of these languages being pushed aside. What happened?
Sadly, you're right. In the 20th century, with many North African countries striving for independence, there was this push to adopt Arabic as the official language.
Right.
Now, while that makes sense in some ways, it also meant that Berber languages were often left out. Schools, government, those spaces often didn't have room for Berber.
Wow. So for someone growing up speaking a Berber language at home, they might not have had the chance to learn it in school or use it in official settings.
Exactly. Can you imagine being told that a core part of your identity, your language, isn't the right one to use in these important parts of life? Yeah. It's been a long road for these languages to gain recognition.
That puts things in perspective. But I'm also seeing in the research that there have been some positive changes recently.
Definitely. Both Morocco and Algeria have taken steps to officially recognize Tamazight, which is a major Berber language, but still an ongoing fight for true equality, a place at the table for all these languages.
That's inspiring to hear, though, this fight for recognition. Speaking of recognizing cool stuff, let's talk about what makes these languages tick, shall we? I'll admit, this is the part that can seem a little intimidating, all that grammar stuff. But our listeners know you're amazing at breaking down complex things so that even someone like me can understand.
I appreciate that, and trust me, we'll keep things clear and engaging.
Oh, okay, good.
Let's start with something familiar, word order. Just like in English, Berber languages tend to follow a subject-verb-object pattern. Simple enough, right?
Okay, I'm with you so far.
But here's where it gets interesting, their sound system.
Mm-hmm.
Well, think about how different a Spanish speaker's rolled R sounds compared to how we say it in English.
Right.
Berber languages have that kind of regional variation in sound making for a lot of richness and complexity.
So are you saying there are different accents within a single Berber language?
Yeah.
That's so cool. It reminds me of how here in the U.S., someone from the South might sound totally different from someone from New York City, even though they're both speaking English.
Precisely. It's those regional variations that make studying languages so fascinating.
For sure.
And speaking of fascinating, prepare yourself, because this next part tends to blow people's minds. Ready for it?
Hit me with it. I love having my mind blown.
Berber languages don't really use adjectives the way we do.
Wait, what? No adjectives? How do you say things like the big house or the blue sky without adjectives?
That's the really cool part. Instead of separate adjectives, they weave those qualities into verbs and nouns.
Okay.
It's like saying, the house, it lives with bigness.
Huh?
Or the sky, it exists in a state of blue.
Whoa. That's a totally different way of thinking about things. It's like they're building the quality right into the essence of the noun.
You got it, and it completely changes how you perceive the world around you.
That's incredible. So instead of describing something with an adjective, they're expressing its inherent nature. This is already making me rethink how I understand language.
And we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Get this. Some of the words you use every day.
You're going to tell me they come from Berber, aren't you?
Uh-huh.
That's amazing.
You're way ahead of me. But yes, words like sugar, maybe even ghoul, they potentially have roots in Berber languages. Arabic acted as a sort of linguistic bridge across history.
Hold on, sugar, as in the thing I put in my coffee every morning, that has a connection to North Africa. Tell me everything.
It's a bit of a linguistic odyssey, but fascinating nonetheless. The word sugar likely started its journey with the ancient Sanskrit word sharkara, meaning granulated sugar.
Okay.
As sugarcane made its way west from India, so did the word. Eventually, it reached North Africa.
So the Berbers picked it up, and then the Arabic language borrowed it from them. It's like a
Mm,
linguistic relay race across continents. The Berbers were already in North Africa, so they adopted the word, and then boom, Arabic, which was spreading throughout the region, picked it up from them.
exactly.
Yeah.
As Arabic's influence expanded across North Africa and beyond, it carried this borrowed word along with it. Then, centuries later, through those vibrant trade routes and cultural exchanges between Europe and the Arab world, sugar, in a slightly altered form, landed in English.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing to think about how interconnected our languages are.
It's like tracing the roots of a word back through time and across different cultures.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize that languages are always evolving, borrowing from each other, and creating these amazing connections. But what about ghoul? That one feels so different, a little spooky, like it has a story behind it.
It does have a bit of a spooky vibe, doesn't it? Now, the connection to Berber is a bit more speculative in this case, but still very interesting.
Okay.
Think about what ghoul evokes those creepy creatures of myth and legend, right?
Yeah.
Well, some linguists believe it might have a connection to an old Berber word, perhaps something like agal, which referred to a kind of desert demon or ogre.
So you're telling me that our modern day image of a ghoul, that sense of something eerie and supernatural, could have its origins in tales of these Berber desert demons passed down through stories picked up by Arabic and eventually making their way into English.
It's a compelling theory. And it highlights how language isn't just about conveying information, it's about sharing those deeply ingrained cultural ideas and beliefs. These words become vessels carrying pieces of history and culture across time and space. It makes you wonder what other words we use every day have these hidden journeys behind them.
Right. It's like every word has a story waiting to be uncovered. But those are just two examples. What other linguistic goodies are hidden in the structure of Berber languages themselves?
Remember how we talked about those regional sound variations?
Yeah.
Berber languages are known for having a rich and varied consonant system. They have a lot of them, and they're not afraid to use them. Some of these sounds might even sound a bit exotic to an English speaker.
Okay, now you've piqued my curiosity. Give me an example. What kind of sounds are we talking about?
Take, for instance, what linguists call emphatic consonants.
Emphatic consonants.
Yeah, they're like regular consonants, but pronounced with an extra burst of energy, a kind of emphasis or intensity. Imagine saying a T or an S, but with a slightly harsher, more forceful sound. It's subtle, but changes the feel of the word.
It's like you can almost feel those consonants in the back of your throat. They sound powerful.
Exactly. It's those subtle shifts in pronunciation that give Berber languages their unique musicality. Speaking of musicality, let's talk about verb conjugation.
Uh-oh.
It can be a bit of a roller coaster, but I promise it's a fun one.
Verb conjugation. Okay, some of our listeners might be grammar whizzes, but others might need a refresher. Could you break down what that means, especially in the context of Berber languages?
You got it. Think of verb conjugation like this. It's how verbs change their form to match who's doing the action and when they're doing it. In English, we add an S to verbs in the present tense when the subject is he, she, or it, like he walks. But Berber languages take this to a whole new level.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How so? English can be pretty simple with its verbs.
Well, picture this. Instead of just tacking on an S, imagine adding prefixes, suffixes, or even changing the vowels within the verb itself. And all these changes depend on who's doing the action when they're doing it, and even the mood of the speaker.
Wow. So you're saying that a single Berber verb can have a mind-boggling number of forms. That's wild.
You're catching on. Each form carries subtle shades of meaning that English might not have direct equivalents for.
Wow.
Is what makes these languages so wonderfully expressive and nuanced.
I'm starting to see why linguists find these languages so captivating. They're like complex, beautiful puzzles with each element perfectly intertwined. It's a shame they're not more widely studied.
I agree, there's so much to discover. And we haven't even touched on their unique way of forming negatives, or their use of something called circumfixes. Basically, affixes that wrap around a word on both sides, like a linguistic sandwich.
Circumfixes? That sounds like a whole other level of linguistic acrobatics. Maybe we need a part 2 of this deep dive to fully explore the intricacies of Berber grammar. But of all the things we've discussed so far, what really surprised me is the fact that these languages don't really have adjectives in the way we think of them.
You and me both. It's one of those things that really challenges our assumptions about how language should work. We tend to think all languages categorize words in the same way, but that's not always the case. Instead of having separate adjectives, Berber languages creatively use a combination of nouns, verbs, and particles to get those qualities across.
So like you were saying earlier, instead of saying something straightforward like the tall tree, They might phrase it more like, the tree it exists with tallness.
Exactly. It's about weaving those qualities into the very essence of the noun. It's a different way of perceiving the world, seeing those qualities as inherent states of being rather than separate descriptors.
It's like they're painting a picture with words, creating a sense of how these qualities are intertwined with the things they describe.
And it really makes you realize that there's no single right way for a language to structure itself. The possibilities are endless.
This is blowing my mind. I'm starting to understand why preserving and revitalizing these languages is so incredibly important. They offer a unique lens through which to view the world, a perspective we risk losing if we don't make an effort to understand and appreciate them.
Absolutely. Language isn't just a tool for communication, it's a living embodiment of history, culture, and identity. The Berber languages, with their deep roots in North Africa and their incredible grammatical features, provide a fascinating window into the diversity and richness of human expression. We can learn so much from them.
It's like we've stepped into a whole new linguistic dimension with these Berber languages.
Right.
They really make you question everything you thought you knew about how language works. But you did mention earlier that there's a lot of diversity within this language family. There isn't just one Berber you can learn, is there?
You've hit on a really important point. We've been talking about Berber languages as this single entity, but it's more like exploring a vast forest with all its different species of trees.
Okay.
Our research indicates there are actually dozens of distinct Berber languages and dialects spoken across North Africa.
Wow.
Some are closely related, like siblings who can understand each other's slang,
Right?
while others are more like distant cousins who need a translator to chat.
That makes sense. So how do linguists even begin to map out this incredible diversity? It sounds like a daunting task.
It's a fascinating linguistic puzzle. They look for clues in vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation to group languages together into branches and sub-branches. Think of it like a detective piecing together a family tree,
Right.
looking for those telltale resemblances and connections that reveal how everything fits together.
And just like any family, I'm sure there are always a few outliers, those distant relatives with their own unique quirks and stories to tell. Are there any particular Berber languages that stand out as especially significant or influential?
Absolutely. One that immediately comes to mind is Kabyle.
Kabyle.
It's spoken by millions of people in Algeria, and it boasts a rich and vibrant literary tradition.
Wow.
In fact, Kabyle literature played a pivotal role in the Berber cultural and linguistic resurgence of the 20th century.
A resurgence. It sounds like these languages have quite a story to tell beyond their unique grammatical features.
They do. For centuries, many Berber languages faced difficult circumstances, suppression and marginalization under various colonial regimes.
Right.
They were often seen as less important than Arabic or French, and their use was discouraged, even actively suppressed in education and government.
Wow.
Imagine the impact on those communities,
Yeah.
having their voices, their linguistic heritage, systematically silenced.
It's heartbreaking to think about, to have something as central to your identity as language be treated as something that needs to be erased. It's a reminder of the power dynamics that often play out around language.
You're exactly right. But this difficult period also ignited a powerful movement of resistance and revitalization. Berber activists and intellectuals, understanding what was at stake, fought tirelessly to raise awareness of their linguistic heritage, to demand recognition and respect for their languages.
It's inspiring to hear about that fight, that dedication to preserving something so essential. Did those efforts gain any traction?
They did. In recent decades, there's been a growing movement to breathe new life into Berber languages.
That's great.
We're seeing more and more initiatives to introduce these languages into school curriculums, to create media like TV shows and radio programs in Berber languages, and to document and preserve the rich tapestry of their oral traditions, ensuring those stories continue to be passed down.
That's incredibly encouraging. It sounds like there's a renewed sense of pride and determination among Berber communities to keep their languages alive and thriving for generations to come.
Absolutely, and it's not just happening in North Africa. With Berber communities now taking root in many parts of the world, these languages are finding new life, new speakers, new expressions in unexpected places. It's a testament to the resilience of language, its ability to adapt and thrive even in the face of adversity.
That's a beautiful thought, this interconnected web of language stretching across continents, carrying with it echoes of ancient stories, cultural nuances, and a spirit of resilience. As we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Berber languages, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners hold on to?
I think the most important thing to remember is that languages are so much more than just tools for communication. They're living embodiments of history, culture, and identity. The Berber languages, with their deep roots in North Africa, their intricate grammar, and their journey through time, offer a unique window into the vast and varied tapestry of human expression.
Beautifully said. And if this deep dive has sparked a bit of curiosity in our listeners, encouraging them to learn a few Berber words, connect with their local Berber community, or simply explore the world of languages with fresh eyes, then I'd say we've accomplished something pretty amazing today.
I completely agree. After all, curiosity is the key that unlocks the boundless wonders of language.
And who knows what hidden connections and fascinating discoveries await those who are willing to listen. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those ears open to the symphony of languages that surrounds us all.